All right, let's dive in. Today, we are talking about the incredible period right after Reconstruction. This is when America was completely reshaped, not by war this time, but by a massive wave of industry and invention that basically built the country we know today.
And it really all comes down to this one big question. How did a few seemingly simple things, a train track, a steel beam, and a light bulb, set off a chain reaction that built modern America? They're way more connected than you might think. And their story, well, it's the story of America itself.
So the first domino to fall, the real catalyst for everything, was the railroad. It was the engine of change, literally. It stitched together a huge, sprawling country and created one single, massive marketplace. And this wasn't just about moving stuff around. It was about shrinking an entire continent. The impact was so profound it actually forced the creation of standardized time zones, just so the trains could run on time. It literally put the entire nation on the same clock for the very first time.
So what made all this happen so fast? Well, you can thank the federal government for lighting the fuse. They made the railroad companies an offer they couldn't refuse. For every mile of track you build to connect the coasts, we'll give you huge amounts of land out west. And just like that, a frantic race to lay track across America was on.
But we have to remember, this incredible achievement was built on the backs of so many people and at an immense human cost. Most of the dangerous, backbreaking work was done by Chinese immigrants. They were paid less, and they faced just horrific conditions, blasting through solid granite mountains, dealing with deadly rock slides and brutal winters. Their story is a really vital but often overlooked part of this whole transformation. The business model they came up with was, you have to admit, pretty brilliant. First, the railroads would sell off all that land the government gave them to settlers for cheap. Then, they'd charge those same settlers to take the train out west. And once those settlers set up their farms and ranches, the railroads would charge them again to ship all their grain and cattle back east to the big cities. It was this perfect, self-fueling, money-making machine.
And the railroad's influence didn't stop there, not even close. Its massive appetite for materials created this powerful ripple effect that kick-started the growth of other giant industries and, in the process, gave rise to the titans of American business.
I mean, just try to picture the scale of this. They needed thousands and thousands of miles of steel track to connect the country. This demand made the railroads by far the biggest customer for the entire steel industry. And that pressure, that huge demand, forced steel companies to figure out new, cheaper, and more efficient ways to mass produce the stuff, which then made steel affordable for everybody else.
But all this explosive growth came with a pretty serious side effect, an insane concentration of wealth and power. A whole new kind of massive corporation was born. And as this quote gets at, their influence went way beyond just business. They started shaping American culture and politics in ways no one had ever seen before. So, how'd they pull it off? One of their key tools was something called a trust. Think of it like this. It was a clever business move where one person or group could take control of a bunch of different companies and run them all as one giant entity. This let them crush their competition, basically by all agreeing to set prices together and starving out anyone who wouldn't join them. And what was the ultimate goal of building a trust? Simple. To create a monopoly. A monopoly is when one single company gets almost total control over an entire industry, from making the product to selling it. And when you're the only game in town, well, you get to make all the rules.
And the best, or maybe I should say the most infamous example of this, was John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil. Just look at this. He controlled a jaw-dropping 90% of the U.S. oil industry. He did it through a mix of ruthless efficiency and, frankly, brutal tactics. For example, he'd cut secret deals with the railroads for cheaper shipping rates that no one else could get. That let him sell his oil for less than his competitors, driving them to either sell their companies to him or just go bankrupt.
Okay, so while all of this is happening, while these industrial titans are completely reshaping the economy, there's a totally separate revolution going on, a parallel one. And this one wasn't sparked by steel or oil, but by electricity. And right at the heart of it was one guy, Thomas Edison.
Edison was just a force of nature. He didn't just have one big hit. He had a whole cascade of them. The phonograph, which could capture sound, the motion picture camera, and of course, the big one, the practical, long-lasting electric light bulb. But here's the crucial part. He didn't just invent the bulb. He also figured out the system to get electrical power to everyone's homes and businesses. But you could argue that Edison's most revolutionary invention wasn't a device at all. It was a method. He created the whole idea of the Industrial Research Lab, what he called an invention factory, a place where teams of people work together systematically just to innovate. He basically invented inventing. And the impact of electricity was just total. Before, factories ran on dirty steam power. People got around cities on horse-drawn streetcars. Life at home was just endless manual labor. But after electricity, you had cleaner, more efficient factories, electric streetcars, and a whole wave of new appliances that completely changed daily life for millions of people.
So, when you pull all of these threads together, the railroad connecting everything, the rise of these huge corporations, and the dawn of the electric age, what you end up with is a nation that was completely and fundamentally transformed in just a couple of decades.
By the time the 20th century rolled around, America was a totally new country. It was now physically linked by rail from coast to coast, it was powered by electricity, and its entire economy was dominated by these massive corporations. But that also meant that an incredible amount of wealth was now in the hands of a very, very small number of people. And that, as you might guess, led to growing calls for the government to step in and reform things.
This era really did forge the America we live in today. It was built on incredible innovation and ambition. But it also left behind a powerful question, one that the country would wrestle with for the next century. What happens when all that power goes unchecked?